What's up guys, Kudou here. This is a bit of a random discussion video I've been wanting to do for a while. Today we're going to talk about game rankings, in particular the 1 through 10 scale. A lot of you are probably wondering exactly why I want to talk about this, and to be honest, I don't know. This is just something that I think about every once in a while, and I kind of want to take a moment to get my thoughts out there. One kind of reason I want to talk about this is because in my game reviews, as you probably know, I don't use any kind of ranking system. What I do is something called Is It Worth It, where I pick sort of 3 price categories and I try to guess exactly how much you would think a game is worth depending on what kind of person you are and what you're looking for. This is admittedly kind of a confusing way of doing things, and I do get the question every once in a while as to why I do that instead of just giving a game a normal rating. One of the reasons is obviously because I want to stand out. It's not something a lot of people do, so if I just tell you how much I think a game is worth, it stands out a lot more than just giving it a 1 out of 10 number. But the main reason, though, is because I don't fully agree with the way that game reviewers rank video games nowadays. Giving a game a number rating is a little weird anyways. I sort of hold the same philosophy as one of the best game reviewers of all time, Acorn Films. If you don't know who that is, I absolutely don't blame you. He got out of the game like 4 years ago, and he only made a few reviews. Never got very big, but honestly, he's one of my favorite video game reviewers to listen to. He also agreed that the number system is a little weird for trying to capture how you really feel about a video game. Since likely none of you have heard of Acorn Films before, I'll put his feelings on the subject here.
And this is why I don't do numbered scores, like most sites. How do you average graphics with story with controls and get a number? How are any of these things equal? Some of these things are window dressing and some are fundamental. Many people consider chess to be the greatest game of all time. How do you think it would fare if you had to average in story? Maybe the role reversal wouldn't be believable enough because the king's such a pussy.
I love you, Ed. Please come back to us one day. Now, this isn't to say I'm against the concept entirely, I just don't think I like the way it's used. A lot of video games will come down to the score that they get from different websites, and the numbers that websites used are always really skewed. Let me ask you something. When did 7 become the average and not 5? We all do remember that 7 is 3 points away from being perfection, right? Yet, in today's world, it seems like if you were to give a game a 5, which is, for the record, what probably 60 to 70% of video games out there deserve, it is the average, middle of the scale, then you would be lambasted for absolutely hating the game. When you give a game or any kind of media that you're reviewing a number, it's easy for people to ignore what you're actually saying about the game or piece of media and just boil it down to how they feel about the number. I can't say that I necessarily blame everybody, that is the easy way out, but when you're thinking about it from the point of view of a game reviewer, it can be very demoralizing to want to go through and talk about a game for 5-10-ish minutes and have people only care about the number that you give at the end, and then have them interpret that number through their own sort of criteria and decide how you feel about the game for you. If I were to give game ratings, I would probably give 5s and 6s a lot because that's where I feel a lot of games are. It's not that I feel that most games are below average, it's that I feel that that's where the average should be. In fact, if I give a game a 6 out of 10, it means I think it stands above average. But if I were to actually give a game a 6 out of 10, people would assume that I think the game is below average, and that's very frustrating. But like I said before, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, so I really want to go in depth and explain exactly what my rating scale is, just in case I decide to use a rating scale in the future. What I'll do is I'll tell you what each number means to me personally, I'll tell you a game that I think deserves the rating, and then I'll do a mini review of the game so you understand where my rating is coming from. In other words, strap in. This is probably going to be a long one, especially since it's unscripted. Now, like I said before, a 5 out of 10 to me is middle of the road. It's a game that I probably enjoyed, a game that I liked going through once, but a game that I probably wouldn't go through and play again, and a game that I probably won't think about very often after I've played it. Doesn't necessarily mean that I didn't like the game or didn't think the game was well made, it's just an experience that I probably won't think about very much after I've turned the game off. An example of a 5 out of 10 to me is Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces wasn't necessarily a bad game, and I think people came down a little too hard on it when they first reviewed it. It's honestly, if you've played through it, not that bad of a game on its own. It's just not necessarily something that I'm looking to go back and play again. I played through it once, and that was okay. If they release any DLC for it, and if it's free, then I'll probably go back and play that too, but I'm just not hitting that new game option, if you know what I mean. I don't have an urge to go back and play it. I never think about it. It was an experience that I had once that I'm just satisfied leaving alone. A 6 out of 10 is a game that exceeded my expectations. A game that I genuinely had some fun with, and that I understand is a pretty well-made game. A 6 out of 10 doesn't necessarily have to be genre-defining, but it delivers an experience I think people will enjoy. To me, a 6 out of 10 is... Get ready for it, guys. Okay, the blood's a-comin'. Etrian Odyssey 5. Now, listen to everything I just said about the game. I said it was an enjoyable experience, that it exceeded my expectations, that I think it's a genuinely well-made game. To me, giving this game a 6 out of 10 actually puts it above average, but if I were to actually slap this 6 out of 10 on my review, people would actually assume that it's below average because everybody's average is up at 7 out of 10. Etrian Odyssey 5 is a well-made game, and it's going to satisfy a lot of people. The thing I think people need to understand is, as well-made as I think the game is, I just don't think it pushes any boundaries. It doesn't really stand out as a game that needs to be any higher than a 6 out of 10. I think other games within the genre, heck, other games within the Etrian Odyssey franchise have pushed the boundaries a lot more than Etrian Odyssey 5 has. See Persona Q and Untold Legend. A lot of people argued with me on my Etrian Odyssey 5 video review because I said that I prefer doing these kinds of games when I have some kind of story objective to work towards. The answer to this, of course, is that Etrian doesn't really need a story. And unfortunately, the nail in the coffin for that argument is the Untold Legends games offer the choice of whether you want a story or whether you want to play the original. If they would set these games up to where you have a version with a story and a version without a story, then people who don't want the story would be satisfied, as well as people like me who would actually enjoy the story. So, when Etrian Odyssey Untold Legends 5 comes out, that game will be a higher rating, because it'll actually satisfy more people and have more options. Isn't that wonderful? If we can't agree on that, then maybe we can at least agree on this. If somebody were at some kind of game shop and they saw Etrian Odyssey 5 for $40 and Etrian Odyssey 3 for, let's say, like $15, then could you, in good conscience, tell them to get Etrian Odyssey 5, pay the extra $25 more because they're going to get more than double the experience? If you feel like you can, if you feel like this game has made enough strides over other games within the series and it totally deserves that extra price tag, then that's cool. That is just our difference of opinions showing. Personally, when I played, the only new idea that they really seemed to have was races, and unfortunately, races have been in video games since the early 90s. So to wrap this up, I think it's a really well-made game, I think it's pretty fun, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it. If that's not enough for you, then I apologize. To me, a 7 out of 10 is a game that really nails the genre that it was trying to go for. A game within a genre or niche that most people within that genre or niche should at least try, because it does what it does so well that most people who like that kind of thing are going to enjoy it. People who aren't already into the style of game probably wouldn't get as much out of it, but people who are already into the style of game are probably going to find a lot to enjoy. It can also be a really nice starting point for people who are looking to get into that style of gaming. I think almost all of the Pokemon games deserve to be here at 7 out of 10. Now, there are a few exceptions here. I would say that Yellow, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Black 2 and White 2, and X and Y all deserve to be 8 out of 10s, but now we're just splitting hairs. Also, before we get too deep into this Pokemon thing, I know there are some people furious at me right now because they're thinking that everything I just said perfectly defines Etrian Odyssey 5. I very specifically don't agree with that at all. I think if you compare the very first Pokemon game to the kind of Pokemon games we have now, you'll see that every single iteration has stood as a shining example of all of the innovations that the Pokemon games have needed so far. Powers keep getting introduced, online play was introduced, online modes are introduced. Every Pokemon game that comes out has a level of polish that most games just cannot even touch on handhelds. Every Pokemon game that comes out is like an event. They take a lot of time to work on it, and the effort really shows. Pokemon fans are very rarely ever disappointed by a new iteration of Pokemon that comes out, and honestly, people who have never even played Pokemon before can jump in at any point in the series and seem to have a pretty good time with it. As far as simple RPGs with collection elements, with just so much to do and see and experiment with, you really can't say that there's another series that does it quite as well as Pokemon does. There are some people out there, granted, that are very harsh on the newer Pokemon games, the main complaint being that the Pokemon Company is running out of ideas for new Pokemon. Just hold on for a second. Do you guys even remember the first batch of Pokemon? This one is a pile of purple sludge. When it evolves, do you know what it becomes? A slightly bigger pile of the same purple sludge. This one is just a bunch of lines. That's it. In the first batch, it didn't even evolve. It's a bunch of lines, blue squiggles with eyes and red shoes. I could literally have made this in MS Paint. It's simple. You just make a bunch of blue squiggles, you give it some googly eyes, and you put some red shoes on it, and that was a Pokemon back then. This is a bird with 2 heads. Now, it's evolving. Wait for it, guys. Wait for it. Now it's a bird with 3 heads, because 3 is more than 2. Oh, guys, get ready, man. Get ready. I'm about to bust out that Magnemite, that metal ball with 2 magnets on the sides. Now, what could we possibly do to evolve this Pokemon? Oh, I have an idea. 3 of them group hugging each other. Man, the new Pokemon of today are just so stupid. I miss the old days, back when they were really creative and inventive and original. Get off of your high horses, guys. If you've been out of the Pokemon game for so long because you think the newer generations of Pokemon just aren't that cool, just keep in mind that the Pokemon Company is not running out of ideas. The Pokemon Company never had any ideas. Our generation of Pokemon had some pretty stupid Pokemon in it too, so you can't just look at the new generations of Pokemon and go, oh, that one's an ice cream cone. Oh, that one's a bag of trash with some eyes on it. Oh, that one over there is a bunch of keys. And then say, man, the Pokemon Company's running out of ideas. Those are stupid Pokemon. Every version of Pokemon has some stupid Pokemon in it, okay? That's just the truth. Go get yourself Sun and Moon or Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon if you want to, and get back into it, because it's fine. Getting back on track. Getting back on track in 8 out of 10 is a game that is just so good that it completely defies the expectations of a genre or a niche. It's a game that brings new ideas to the table. It's just so well done that regardless of what kind of game fan you are, you should at least try this kind of game out because you're probably going to enjoy it. It's fun, it's memorable, and it's something that you actively want other people to experience because it's just so good. An easy 8 out of 10 to me is Nier Automata. In fact, in a confusing way, I actually think this might end up being my game of the year, but we'll get onto that later. Nier Automata, for me, is a game that just came out of nowhere and completely blew away any expectations I had for the game. I went into it thinking it was just going to be a regular beat-em-up JRPG, and it ended up being a fast-paced, fun, enjoyable experience that I am more than willing to go back and play right now. It combines Toho-style bullet hell with Bayonetta / Devil May Cry style combat, and you sort of do both at the same time, and it somehow works. The story's a really fun ride, the characters are pretty memorable. It was just way better than it had any right to be, and I think everybody should go out and try it. It's just a delight, and now that it's on PC, I don't think anybody has an excuse to not have tried this game out. I don't care how you have to get the $60. Get the $60 together, get this game, play it, you're going to enjoy yourself. A 9 out of 10 is industry defining. A game that is so good, that brings so many great ideas to the table and executes them so flawlessly that future games within that style of game should use that game's ideas as a framework. It's a game so good that it raises the standards for what a good game actually is in the future, and even potentially make past games less good by comparison. I recognize that this opinion isn't unique in the slightest, but to me, an example of a game that fits that criteria is Super Mario Odyssey. It's a game that appeals to everybody, that nailed everything it was trying to do, that brought so many new ideas to the table that it completely separates itself from every game that came before it. The little tricks and maneuvers that people are still figuring out right now, like a month after the game's release, the possible framework for future Super Mario games, the world variety, the gameplay variety, everything about this game is so amazingly done that it should be what other platformers that come out in the future aspire to be. Even if future platformers have to rip ideas off from Super Mario Odyssey, I want them to do it, because Super Mario Odyssey is just such a great game that I want more games to be like Super Mario Odyssey. And it's not all hype. The game really is that good. The game could have come out half as good as it is now, and people would have just been, okay, that was a pretty fun Mario experience. I enjoyed it, and I was quite satisfied. But no, it took every single chance it could to go above and beyond that it really does deserve to be the new industry standard. There's so many things to collect and do. The pacing is perfect. The worlds are varied and nice. The boss fights could use a little bit of work, but I'm sure the boss fights will be ironed out in the future. The core of the game is just too well done to be ignored. So here we are, 10 out of 10. What is Kudou's idea of a 10 out of 10 rated game? To me, a 10 out of 10 gaming experience is an experience that was so impactful that it actually influences who I am as a person. A game that just out of the blue or off of just a teeny tiny little trigger will make me go back and re-experience moments from the game within my daily life. I could just be at work doing something tedious or monotonous, and my mind will go back into moments from the game, and I'll just relive entire sections of the game while I'm sitting and doing that tedious task. We take this for granted, but do you realize how crazy that is? That means that the medium is so powerful that even if I haven't touched that medium in months or years even, my mind is still inside of it, playing the game, booting it up, and actually going through it again. Sometimes even involuntarily. That is a 10 out of 10 game. And what is my example of a 10 out of 10 game? Guys, it is Majora's Mask. Why was Majora's Mask so impactful to me as a kid? Let me take this moment to tell you some fun stuff about me. When it's cloudy outside and I think rain might be coming, I think about this traveling Goron that you meet randomly within Majora's Mask. He has this one small piece of dialogue about how he can smell that rain is coming, and every time I even think that rain might be coming, I think about him. And when it does start raining, I start hearing the sped up Clocktown music within my head. I know that probably means I'm insane, but that's just how it is. And this happens every time, without exception. Majora's Mask is just a gaming experience that I think about constantly. It hit every note that I've ever wanted a video game to hit, and just did everything perfectly for me. I think the game's biggest selling point was this Bomber's Notebook you got. The Bomber's Notebook led you to helping people and finding out more about who they were as people. That's the thing that set Majora's Mask apart from all other RPGs I had played at the time. They weren't just NPCs. Everybody in the game was a person with their own thoughts, with their own patterns, with their own everything that was unique to them. Usually in a game like this, you're just saving the world because the world is in danger, okay? You need to stop whatever evil force is going to destroy the world because, hey, everybody lives here and you need to stop that from happening. Or you need to save a bunch of people from dying or whatever because death is bad and I guess that's it. But in Majora's Mask, nothing is quite that simple. Everybody's lives have been personally affected by the Skull Kid, and you get to experience everybody's, and I mean just about everybody's, personal hardships because of Skull Kid. There are so many small, intricate stories woven into this tale of you trying to get Majora's Mask back that it can get kind of overwhelming. Side quests aren't just side quests in Majora's Mask. Every single side quest in the game is about you getting personally involved into what another character is experiencing, what they've lost, what they're going to lose, and everything about who they are as a character. Take this guy for instance, okay? He's just some dude sitting at a farm and he's got a side quest for you. When you talk to him about the side quest though, it's not just something like go out and collect 10 of an item or go out and kill 10 of an enemy. He actually opens up to you about how he doesn't want the world to end because the chickens that he raised since they're hatching are going to grow up. And if the world gets destroyed, he's never going to get to see these chickens grow up. That might sound stupid out of context, but it's such an emotional moment within the game because this guy is facing his imminent death, and the one thing that he's thinking about, the one thing that bothers him more than anything else in the whole world, is that he's not going to get to see these animals that he was going to raise grow up into adults. And when you help him, he thanks you, and that's not even the end of it, because he has to come to terms with the fact that even though that one small thing has been fixed in his life, he still has to deal with the fact that he's going to die. It's just now he gets to die with no regrets. See, it's not just about the character dying, it's about him wanting this one small task before he dies, and once he gets this one small task fulfilled for him coming to terms with his own death and accepting it as it's coming. That's so much deeper than most of the side quests that we get today. And probably the coolest thing about the side quests here is almost all of them give you some kind of mask at the end of it, and some of them do stuff, some of them don't, but every mask is sort of like an indicator of somebody in the game that you've helped and gotten to know personally. Some people don't really like this system because what happens is you have to relive the same 3 days over and over again, so at some point you're going to have to play the Song of Time, go back in time, and undo you doing the side quest, but you get to keep the mask. And I actually really like this a lot more because it's a sort of reminder that even if you can solve these people's problems for the time being, the problem's not going to be truly solved until you defeat Skull Kid and get the Majora's Mask back. So after you help these people and you see them again, knowing what their story is, knowing what they have at stake, and knowing what kind of people they are, it makes wanting to go after Skull Kid just that much more rewarding. I know the one side quest that everybody talks about when they talk about this game is the Anjou Calf AR side quest, so I don't really want to jerk it off too hard here, but I do want to talk about it a bit, because as much as people talk about it and praise it, it is really well done. For like the one person out there who has never heard of this before, I get to explain it to you. Anjou and Calf AR are this couple that are set to be married pretty much at the end of the 3 days. It's not that important, but at the end of the 3 days, there's going to be a festival, and when you play the game, you have those 3 days to complete everything, because at the end of the festival, the world's going to be destroyed. None of that matters, though. At the end of this festival, these two are supposed to be married. You might notice that the woman looks like a full-grown woman, and the person she's hugging looks a bit like a child. This is because the Skull Kid has turned Cafe, the guy, into a child, and he is so ashamed by this that he cannot face Anjou, his fiancée, anymore. So you go through this whole thing seeing both sides, her being absolutely heartbroken about not knowing what happens to her fiancé, and him not being able to face his fiancée the way he looks now, because he knows that they can't get married because the Skull Kid has sort of turned him into a kid and the relationship can no longer work. A bunch of stuff happens, and eventually, on the night of the final day, you get a chance to reunite these two, and they both have these masks, and they're like sort of wedding ceremony masks, where they come together to form one mask, and they decide to give that mask to you. And here at the end of days, rather than running, rather than looking for a safe place to hide, or being sad about the destruction of the earth, they just hold each other. They just share their last moments being in love with each other, facing their imminent death. Nothing I've just said does this side quest enough justice. It is seriously one of the most well done side quests in all of video gaming. So you get to the final fight after experiencing all these different side quests, after getting to know all of these different people, you get up to the moon and you do the final fight with Majora. And when you get there, it's no longer just about you and saving the world. Majora has to be defeated so that Anjou and Cafe can have a happy marriage, so that the crazy chicken guy can actually live long enough to see his chickens grow into adults. Majora's Mask saddles you with the heaviest weight of all time: responsibility. If you want all of the people you've come to meet and know to have happy lives, to undo all of the sadness that Majora has done to them, then this room, this boss fight, is your chance to fix everything. No more resetting after you've solved a problem and making the problem come back again. This is your chance to once and for all just fix everybody's lives so they don't have to go through their suffering anymore. It's not just their lives at stake, okay? It's literally inner things about them that you're about to solve. And the boss fight is so intense because of it. Every single time Majora lands a hit on you, it's like, oh, looks like you might lose here. Guess you don't care about Lulu getting her children ripped away from her and her husband getting murdered. Ah, you just got hit again. Guess you don't care if that dancer Kamaro dies. He's gonna go out there and die alone in the snow, and his pupils are never gonna find out whatever happened to him, but we just can't be bothered to dodge attacks now, can we? Wow, look at that. You're on your last heart container. Well, I guess this is the part where Darmani dies, the village elder goes out to look for him, and eventually he dies as well. And the youngest Goron in the village will just have to grow up without an uncle or a father. But it's not like you care, you just kind of keep getting hit with attacks. You could solve all of this, you could solve every single one of the things I just said, but you just can't be bothered to react fast enough to dodge those tentacles. It sucks, and it really makes you angry. Every time you get hit with an attack or you miss an attack, it makes you feel like you're just letting all of these people that you've grown to know and love down. But because of all of that, because you have this weight of responsibility on your shoulders, because everything in the game matters to you so much now, beating Majora actually matters to you now. It's not just about beating a game, it's about getting closure on all of these different side stories that you've grown to know over the course of the game. It's feeling the elation when you know how many lives were saved, how many people will get to grow and have happy lives because of what you've done. And when you help everyone, oh, things get real. What makes the Fierce Deities Mask the coolest upgrade in video game history is you only achieve it by helping every possible person you can in the game. The Fierce Deities Mask isn't some arbitrary power-up you get from filling some kind of number or getting to a certain point in the game. The Fierce Deities Mask is your reward for actually taking the time to get to know the struggles of every NPC you come across. And let me tell you, it feels good. You go into this crazy powerful mode and you just beat the crap out of Majora, and it's this feeling of elation that I cannot talk this game up enough. This game was so influential to me growing up. I recommend anybody who has never played this game before or never even thought about playing this game before, find a way to play it and play it. Maybe it's a little outdated by today's standards, maybe you won't have the same experience I did, but this is the mark of a 10 out of 10 game to me. It's a game that just encapsulates everything I've wanted out of a gaming experience, and I still to this day play it in my mind. Now, since I've given this game a 10 out of 10 and said so many nice things about it, does that mean I think it's a perfect game? Heck no, this game's not perfect. For one thing, the dungeons suck. They're so short and so simple, they might as well not even be there. The boss fights are okay, but the dungeons themselves, they're so boring. The combat doesn't really feel that great. I mean, I've never really had a huge problem with 3D Zelda combat, but I've never really thought it was great either. The game's graphics, of course, other than maybe Skull Kid himself, don't really hold up that well. The world feels really small when compared to games like Ocarina of Time. They don't really do much with some of the NPCs you see around town, which would have been really nice, but they just didn't take that extra effort, I suppose. See, I can name problems with the game. Being a 10 out of 10 doesn't mean that a game is perfect, because no game is ever going to be perfect. A 10 out of 10 game just has to resonate with you on some level, you know? That's what I think anyways. I think a near perfect game with fresh ideas, great gameplay, and just everything that you want deserves probably a 9 out of 10. And it's that emotional connection you feel with the game that gives it that extra point and makes it a 10 out of 10 if it's something that you have that connection with. If it's a game you think is just flawlessly executed and deserves to be the next industry standard, then, well, that's a 9 out of 10. So, now that we've got that out of the way, on the other end of the spectrum, a 4 out of 10. For me, a 4 out of 10 is a game that came to the plate with a bunch of great ideas that just for one reason or another doesn't work. It had the makings of a great game within it, but it just wasn't executed well, or there was just something really flawed or off about the game itself after it was made. A 4 out of 10 is a game that you can acknowledge it had great ideas within it, but you can't really recommend it as a good game. For me, a 4 out of 10 is ARMS for the Nintendo Switch. This is a really tough one to try and describe, because I feel like on the surface, ARMS is actually a really solid game, but it just doesn't have that sort of popcorny flair that something like Splatoon does. The way that Splatoon works is because it's set up in such small 3-minute matches, you could just pop it out right before you go to bed and say, I'm just going to play like 1 or 2 matches. So then you actually go in, you play 1 or 2 matches, and you go, just 3 minutes. I'm on a winning streak right now. I'll just queue up for 1 more. So you queue up for 1 more, and then by the time you get done queuing up for 1 more, you realize it's 5 in the morning and you have to be to work in an hour. It's just such mindless, dumb fun that you lose track of time. But ARMS just cannot do that for some reason. I remember the hype surrounding this game before it came out. I remember some people were really angry when some people ended up with review copies before other people because everybody wanted to climb the ladder, be the #1 ARMS player, and then like a week or 2 after it came out, all that hype just kind of died. And like I said before, I think at its core, this is a pretty fine example of this kind of game. It's a really unique take on fighting games and boxing games. I think it's really fun to get up, move around. The controls seem really responsive. You have a lot of options from blocking to striking to grabbing. You have all these characters with different abilities. You have all these different arms that you can equip. So what happens? Honestly, why does this game feel so lackluster? I'm still not really sure, but I think I can sum it up like this. I think as a concept, ARMS is good, but I think it tried to have its cake and eat it too when it comes to casual versus competitive play. ARMS very clearly wanted to be a competitive strategic fighter, something that people built esports out of. The problem with this is because of the simplicity of the game, it just isn't that interesting to watch or to try and master. Now hold up, I know there's some ARMS fans out there that are ready to completely destroy my channel with dislikes because I just said that. I'm not saying that this is a bad game, and I'm not saying that nobody out there wants to try and master it, but I'm saying that it tried to hit both the casual and competitive markets, both kind of haphazardly, and I don't think it really succeeded with either. There's just enough depth within the game that casual fans can be just completely dominated by anybody who knows what they're doing, and there's just too many casual, slow elements for people to take this seriously as a competitive fighting game. This more seems like something that could have been the add-on to a different game, like maybe if this were sort of a mini game or something within Splatoon or a different game like that, I think this would have been a bit more enjoyable, but this as a standalone experience just isn't really worth recommending to many people, especially since it's a very online-centered game and there's really not very many people playing it online. Like, just getting this for a single-player experience I think would be absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, a lot of great ideas, just it didn't work out as a game, and that's what a 4 out of 10 is to me. A 3 out of 10, on the other hand, is a different story. With a 3 out of 10, one of two things happened. Either your idea was just really bad, it didn't matter how well you executed it, it was just a really bad idea from the start, and it was probably never going to be a great experience. Or you had a pretty decent idea, but you just screwed it up so badly that nobody would actually get any enjoyment out of it. Or it just falls so far below the mark that you wouldn't recommend it to anybody over a different game. I guess it could also be a combination of the two. An idea that's just kind of and the game product actually just came out like so it's not really something that you'd recommend to anybody because it's just not that well done. Now, you probably have no idea what this game is. Concept Revolt is a remake of a game called Concept on the original DS. To summarize what this game is, alright, get ready for it, alright, your head is about to spin with just how crazy this idea is. It is Magic the Gathering Monopoly. You go around a Monopoly-like board, you lay monsters down, and then you play until one player has enough money to win the game and go past start. Does that sound fun to you? Well, I promise it isn't. Every single match in this game is so tedious. You're just rolling a dice and moving across a board. Some turns you don't get to do anything. Some turns you get to do a whole bunch of stuff. You could just end up rolling the dice, hitting the wrong square and losing all of your money. Or you could just sort of go around the board and have absolutely nothing happen, but your opponent has such bad luck that you end up winning anyways. Matches are so long too. They take like 30 minutes to an hour each, and that's even for just the simplest matches. Wait until you get to the matches where you have 3 or 4 people involved. Those things can go on forever. The deck customization kinda sucks. The story is really, really stupid. Even the online play isn't that good. There's a bunch of lag, and if somebody disconnects, it could ruin the entire match. Finding a match to begin with is just... it is complete nonsense. Nothing about this game was a good idea. Nothing about it. Nothing about it. And the fact that this is a remake of an idea that they already tried once makes it even worse. It's almost amazing how many bad ideas can be within this one game. Nobody should try this game out. You shouldn't spend any money to get it, even to add as part of your collection. There's got to be something out there you can buy that's more worthwhile. And even if the idea of Magic the Gathering Monopoly appeals to you, this is actually just a worse version of a free phone game called Game of Dice. Go download that game for free, and don't touch Concept Revolt at all. There is no reason. It is the biggest waste of time on the 3DS. Now, a 2 out of 10 is a game that somehow managed to screw up both things. It was somehow both an awful idea with no redeeming qualities, and also the game itself was poorly made and didn't work very well. When I think 2 out of 10, I think No Man's Sky. Now, I know what you're thinking. No, I'm not one of the people who's angry about all of the lies that were surrounding this game. Honestly, I didn't even know much about the lies until the game was already released. Here's my problem with No Man's Sky. Even if all of those promises that were promised to you were kept, what would have made the gameplay better? It is a game where you travel from one planet or area to another planet or area. You scan rocks, you scan more stuff, and then you leave. Maybe you fight some robots sometime. Maybe you do a bit of awful aerial combat against quote-unquote space pirates. The game is about nothing. You do nothing. You accomplish nothing. Even if you get to the main goal of the game, the center of the world, do you know what's waiting for you there? I'll give you a second. It's nothing. Nothing. The game is nothing. If you did have multiplayer where you could meet up with other players on planets, what would you even do with those other players? Scan stuff together? Is that what you wanted? Was there to be multiplayer so you could experience this nothing with somebody else? If there had been something amazing at the center of the world, would you really recommend this game because there was something at the very, very end during the last 10 minutes that was actually enjoyable? Everybody gets so angry when they think about all this stuff that Sean Murray said during interviews to get people to pre-order the game, and I'll admit that was pretty scumbaggy, and I'm not letting him off the hook for that, but even if everything Sean Murray said had actually come to pass, even if he included some kind of update that patched all of that stuff into the game and made it the game that he promised it would still be an awful game with nothing to do. I've seen gameplay footage. The environments don't look that great. The monsters and stuff don't look that great. There's nothing about this game that makes it worth playing, even if everything were fixed. And on top of all of the bad ideas, on top of how boring the game is, on top of how this game doesn't really offer anything as an experience goes, it doesn't even work right. There's so many crashes. There's so many bugs. They somehow released Bethesda-level graphical bugs in a game where nothing happens. You couldn't even succeed at making a mediocre game? If this game had no bugs at all, if this game never crashed, if this game never had any sort of errors or anything at all, it would still have only succeeded in being a 3 out of 10, a functional game around a stupid idea. And it couldn't even succeed at doing that. If you want multiplayer space combat fun, go play Destiny. I know people rag on it a lot. I'm not going to come out here and say that it's like the greatest multiplayer experience of all time ever, but if what you liked about No Man's Sky was that you could go around to these different planets and explore, and if you were really bothered by the fact that there was no multiplayer, go try Destiny with your friends, okay? Because I think what you actually wanted will be within that game. And if you're going to complain about the grinding or something, what do you do in No Man's Sky? You go around and you literally grind the environment for materials. It's dumb. There's nothing redeemable about No Man's Sky, okay? Just John Murray needs to make a completely new game. Stop trying to fix this one. It's over. It failed. Just do something else, please. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. What makes a game a 1 out of 10? Now, to have hit this point, we already have to have a stupid idea. We have to have had the bugs and glitches and the non-functional gameplay. Alright, those we've already hit. But to successfully be a 1 out of 10, you have to somehow create an experience so bad that it negatively affects you. An experience that has just wasted your time. It wasn't a great idea. It doesn't function properly. And on top of all of that, it goes beyond not being fun. It is the anti-fun. It actually makes you upset and angry as you play it because of how bad it is. I present to you my 1 out of 10. Fir Fun is a game that is so unbelievably bad that I actually think about it sometimes. I think about how bad this game is and how much of a waste of time it is for everybody. It wastes my time by making me think about how much of a waste of time it is. If you haven't played this game yet, don't, okay? Not even in a joking matter, just don't. You look up some gameplay footage of it if you really, really have to, but the game is just a ripoff of the ukulele sort of phenomenon that happened for a while, okay? It just wanted to cash in on all of those ukulele fans that were waiting for ukulele. The characters are ugly, the environments, even though they are sort of passable, don't really look that good. The game just doesn't control right. There is nothing fun about this game. There is nothing good about this game. And as if that wasn't bad enough, while you're playing this broken, awful game, this irritating voice talks to you, and I guess it's like a YouTuber or something. I think I heard in like the Jimquisition, like there's a YouTuber that talks to you while you're playing the game. He needs to stop. Now, the voice sounds like somebody who isn't a native English speaker, so I don't want to be too hard on them for that, okay? It's when I'm talking Japanese, I'm sure I sound like a complete idiot, and I don't want to make fun of somebody who isn't a native English speaker speaking English. Good for that guy for putting himself out there, but the fact that they have a voice at all that talks to you as commonly as this voice does, it could be the voice of Barry White or Shaft, and it would still be a bad idea because nobody wants to hear that. You guys remember Omochao? You guys remember how annoying Omochao was? Imagine if there was an Omochao-like creature that just talked to you the entire time you were trying to experience this bad game. It's like the game is somehow making it hard for you to experience how bad it is. It is actually keeping you from this bad game that you are trying to experience. You are actively going after the bad gameplay, is what I'm trying to say. This game is a mind trip, man. I just can't get behind it at all. So there it is. You fight off the bad voice, and you finally get to concentrate on the awful controls, the really lackluster environments. It's it has just got that tasty 1 out of 10 taste all over it. It wasn't a good concept. It was done terribly. It doesn't function well because it wasn't a very well made game, and the game irritates you the entire time you're trying to play it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the epitome of a 1 out of 10 in my mind. So there you have it. I knew this video was going to be long, but this is actually getting even longer than I wanted it to be. It's probably because it's been like a month since I've made a proper video, so I just wanted to get everything out here, and yeah, it felt really good to go back and make another video again. Regardless, we're at almost an hour now. If you enjoyed it, please leave it a like. Those things really do help me out. If you have any thoughts on game ratings or what you want me to talk about next, leave them in the comment section below. Today, I want you guys to rate this video out of 10 in your comment to let me know that you watched the entire thing. And you know, I'm not really opposed to rating games in my videos if that is something that you would like. If you think my videos or my game reviews would be better if I actually did rate them 1 out of 10, leave that in your comment too. Because I might do it, you know, it might make my my thoughts on games a little easier to understand than just doing the whole worth it, how much do I think you should spend on it sort of thing. Because like I said before, I don't really mind giving my sort of 1 out of 10 impression on a game. It's just, I feel like people get too hung up on the number and what they think the number represents, and they don't pay enough attention to what the number is actually supposed to represent to the reviewer that's actually saying it. And if it's just going to be really distracting, then I figure why bother. But if you guys want it to be there, then maybe I can look into including a number with some of my future reviews. And finally, if you found this video by accident, then subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudou news. I need some water. Catch you next time.